Wait for the little thing to say we're actually live. We are live. Good morning, good afternoon, good day, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to episode 10 of No More Pea Soup with me, Fiona Ross, the Queen of Kings. And today I am very, very pleased to be speaking to a young man named Perry Power. He is an author, a change maker, an all-round incredible young man who has also a very good skill in acting. And he is the author of a book called Breaking the Silence. And so we will be talking today about breaking the silence. So welcome, Perry.
Hey, thank you very much. Number 10, huh? Pretty cool.
Number 10, yeah, we're number 10. Thank you so much for joining me, because I think the subject today is one that it's a very important subject for all people, but for men specifically, because there is silence around it, and that is the subject of sexual abuse. And I know in the work that I do, this is something that will often come up quite a long way into a coaching program. My clients will come to me for one thing, and then way down the line, it comes up that they were abused when they were young, or maybe not so young. And so I wanted this to be an opportunity to speak to that for men, to bring it out of the darkness for them. So how about we start with, how did you come to write Breaking the Silence, and a little bit about your story?
Yeah. So specifically around the book came the first year of COVID. So when we had the lockdown and we were all locked to, I think, like 1 hour a day or whatever they gave us, 2 hours a day. I can't remember what it was. And I reached a stage where I left my old business. I used to run a business with a business partner called Fit Story, and we would help online fitness coaches grow their business through branding and storytelling. And I basically just wasn't aligned with it after maybe 2 years of doing it. And I ended up leaving that business without a safety net. Now, to be honest, I've never been somebody with a safety net. No matter how many times my mom and dad have tried, son, you need to have a safety net. I'm like, no, I'm not having a safety net, because why do I need a plan B? Because plan A is going to work. And that's always been me. It's always been me. And so I ended up, now I was really bad with money. I didn't have savings. So I was making decent money from the business, but I would spend it quicker than it came in.
Yeah.
And then, and it was, the timing of it was brilliant in a weird way. I, at that stage, I had just moved, just before I made a decision to leave the business, I'd moved into like a 2-bed house, nice sized house with my dog, just me and my dog, but it was unfurnished, which means I would have needed to put a bit of money in to furnish the place up. I had just moved in, and then I don't know, I was lazy with getting the furniture, so I didn't get it for like a few days, and then I decided to leave the business. I was like, okay. And then I was sleeping on the floor in a sleeping bag for I think it ended up being like a couple months, and then I got a sleeping couch from a charity shop, which I was on for about 6 months.
So this is all down.
Sorry, all in lockdown. Yeah. That first year was definitely the darkest year of my life, 100%.
Yes, I was going to say that's a perfect opportunity for some real introspection, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a disgusting time. Horrible, because my girlfriend at the time, my ex-girlfriend, she left me at that stage as well. And I didn't realize, now looking back, I had some severe abandonment issues, and I probably still do to a degree, right? I don't know if I fully worked through it. I have no idea. I've tried to, but we'll see if it happens again. Hopefully it doesn't, my current girl, but we'll see. But when she left, the abandonment, it was just horrific. Like, I'm talking, like suicidal beyond belief.
Wow.
And I ended up at that stage, I'd already been leading my story, but I was doing it kind of like a hobby. It wasn't as in like I was doing it on the side, right? I didn't really see where it could go. And
So
then
let's enlighten the viewers on
sure.
what that story was
Yeah.
that you,
The one, yeah. So that story which kind of led now to that moment is around sexual abuse and is around breaking the silence. So when I was 11, roughly 11 and a half, my stepmom caught my step granddad sexually abusing me in the living room of my nan's house. Now, my step granddad, I always get this question. My step granddad is my dad's stepdad, so it was my nan's husband, and he was sort of molesting me. My stepmom caught it. She then took me out of the living room, took me home, and then from taking me home, she then tells my dad about what she saw or what she thinks that she saw. My dad then questions me. Now I don't remember any of this. I don't remember that specific event that my stepmom caught it happening. I don't remember getting taken home. I don't remember my dad talking to me. I very, very vaguely remember like a snippet of that conversation where I remember him saying to me, "You're not going to go around there anymore, right? You're not going to go around to your nan's house, and you need to keep this here at home. Keep this between the four walls of the house. Don't go to school. Tell your friends. Don't go and tell your mother, your biological mother." And it didn't feel like he was silencing me because
mm,
I didn't know the depth of what was happening. I just thought it was my step granddad showing me love in a way that another family member wasn't. So I didn't understand it until the years went on and sexual abuse started to become something to a degree in the newspapers, on the news channels, amongst conversations. And I was like, oh, that's what it was. And then I understood the depth of abuse. And then that's
mm,
when the masks started, right? And that's when the shame, which is what a lot of men, the main thing, women as well, yes, but especially with men when it comes to masculinity and what we believe it is, shame is what really takes over like a plague inside of our body,
yeah.
and that's what I was living with for a number of years. Yeah.
And so that was kind of driving you at an unconscious level.
Hmm.
How is it manifesting in your life, in your?
Um, I remember I was living in London with my parents, and I was somebody who he was a virgin at the age of 16. Didn't really the thought of talking to a hot girl was like suicide,
Right.
and and didn't have many friends other than his two or three friends that would hang around with. But he wanted to be like the American equivalent of a jock. He wanted to be that guy because it was a polar opposite of the life that he was living. Right?
So I'm just going to go for clarity here. That he is you.
Yeah,
That's the younger version of
exactly.
who you are now, and that's interesting that you're making him a third person.
Yeah, yeah, because he that was a um you know that was somebody who then built an identity on what he believed he needed to be because he was too scared to be um, the boy that was abused. He didn't want
Right.
to be that identity, and you will find this a lot with people who go through abuse. They try to change their story, right? They try to run away from what happened, and that's impossible. You tire out at some point. And when we moved to London, no, moved out of London, we moved to Berkshire. I remember being like, right, I'm changing college. Nobody knows me here. I'm going to become that character. I'm going to become that identity. I'm going to become that embodiment of a jock. So when I went to this college, I was the guy who didn't give a shit. I was the guy who slept with like 30 girls. Really
Yeah.
hadn't slept with anyone, right?
And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I was just Jack the lad. And I faked it until I made it, essentially, is what it was. Right. And
Yeah.
I did start sleeping around with the girls. I did start making all the friends and, and all this was happening. And I would just turn up halfway through, like, the day at college would start at 9 and I'll rock up at like half 11, 12. I'm like, yo, I'm here, And I just didn't care. And that's, that was great in
Mm,
this world that I was living in for a very short period of time. Then
mm,
I started dating somebody. My first girlfriend, we ended up being together for about 6 years. And then as fast forward a little bit, we went traveling around Australia. We came back, and then I was watching an interview on the Ellen DeGeneres show, and it was
Yeah.
Lewis Howes, and he had just brought out his book, Masking Masculinity.
Yeah.
And she was saying to him, well, like, tell us about the book. Why have you done it? And he goes, well, because I was abused as a kid, and I grew up as this man who felt like he needed to be a certain way in this world, and that's what started to create the masks.
Yeah.
And when he said it like that and he articulated it in that way, I was like, oh, that character that I created really was just a bunch of masks that I put on. And I was like maybe 3 years into personal development at this point. So I was lucky enough to, you know, have a certain level of awareness to know that I can create changes if I wanted to. And I was like, right, what's the first thing I need to do? And I waited for my girlfriend to come home. And then I told her, listen, that guy who you started dating, he wasn't really the guy who you thought he was.
Mm.
And then I told her about the abuse, and that became the first time that I broke my silence.
Yeah, and that's an important moment, isn't it? To tell someone you trust, to let it out of yourself.
Yeah, it is. Now, something that I say all the time, which is what my whole book is kind of written around, my TEDx talk is around this, and is that how I done it, how I broke my silence, I wouldn't recommend other people to do, right? Because I was
Right.
lucky, right? And that is something that I've learned since then. And is that if Abby is her name, if Abby decided that she didn't believe me, or that she was freaked out from the fact that I was abused, or she gave me some type of reaction that was negative, that wasn't welcoming, that would have crushed me. And that probably would have put me back into living in silence for a much longer and darker period of time.
Right.
Because now I associate my truth with rejection.
Yeah.
So what I say to people now is, don't go out and tell somebody, even if you think that you trust them, because you can't control the actions of other people. So you can't control what the responses are going to be. Instead, you need to break the silence to yourself first in as many different ways as possible. Then on step number 17 or step number 22, then you go and tell somebody, because by that point, you've owned your truth and you've owned your story.
Right.
You know,
That's
so yeah. So that's what I say now, and it's
how would a person go about? What would those steps look like of breaking the silence to yourself? So I'm hearing in that statement that this is a secret you're keeping from yourself. It's
yes,
boxed away in the back somewhere, that we don't think about that thing anymore. It didn't really happen. So it sounds like there's a bringing that out into the light within yourself first. So what would steps be that somebody could take?
yeah, and it's like extending what you just said there. Is like you've got this dark secret in a drawer, and instead of, for the very first time of you opening up that drawer, you know, if you imagine you're gonna bring in somebody into that room to look inside that drawer at the same time as you, you know, and they don't give you the reaction that you want because it's something that you're very vulnerable, that can crush you. And you'll probably close that drawer and you'll lock it up. But if you can go into that room yourself and open up the drawer, have a little peek, close the drawer. Week later, open up the drawer for a little bit longer, have a look at it, put the drawer back, and keep on doing that until you can open up that drawer and leave it open, right? And the ways that you do that is, like, I give quite a few examples in the book, which I cover now. Ultimately, it's not necessarily down to like how you do it, because you can do it in a numerous amount of ways, because it just comes down to you releasing emotions that you've had trapped within you for so long and expressing it through whatever medium you want. Because vocally telling somebody is one form of expression, right? But you can, for example, I'm going to name some random ones here. You could create a piece of clay. You can go to pottery and you can create a mug. And when you're creating this mug, you are allowing the emotions to go through your hands and go into the thing that you've created. And then this final product is this mug. To other people, it's a mug, but to you, this is the first resemblance of your story being broken, right? One option. Another one is you got a blank canvas, and then some people might see a blank canvas with paint spattered all over it, and they might be like, what no, this isn't art, right? But how do you not know that that artist just broke their silence, their 17-year silence, by allowing their emotions to flow through the paint that has been expressed on that? Another one is you could journal your story. Another one, you could write a poem. Another one, you could write a song. Another one, you can choreograph a dance piece expressing your story. You see what I mean? So there is an abundant amount of ways that you can do it. But the more times you do it, you know, you've written a poem, Then the next step, you've written a song, for example. Next step, you've drawn a picture. Next step, you do this. Next step, you do that. And then after 13 times, you then want to tell your mum or your dad or your sibling or your partner, and you tell them, and they accept it and like, wow, thank you for showing me. You're going to feel fantastic. But then if they're like, oh, okay, you know, and that's it, and you're like, and you're expecting more. Now you're like, well, you know, it's unfortunate for that response. I would have loved more support from you, but I know my truth. I know my self-worth. I know my story. And even if they're like, I don't believe that happened to you. Come on, you're exaggerating. Like all you do is seek attention. That will hurt, but it will hurt a lot less than what it would have done is if you open up the drawer with them for the very first time together.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can see that if you had somebody who put you straight into it, oh, you made that up, or, you know, denied it in some way, that would shut you down forever.
There's nothing worse than being silenced. And you just have to look at protests. You have to look at stories being made in Hollywood where it resembles somebody being silenced or a collective being silenced and the fight back. So,
yeah,
for sure.
So the first person you spoke to was your girlfriend, Abby, at the time. And that went well for you, as it turned out. How about your family? How did that go when you had to then break your silence to your family?
Well, so to give a bit of context and then give a better answer to that. So June the 1st, 2017, my dad, he passed away, right? So he had a heart attack. And so he wasn't around when I broke my silence. So when I then, maybe 3 or 4 months after telling Abby, I go to a business mastermind. It's like a 4-day event. Right? I can't remember how many days, but like 4-day event. And for to grow my fitness business way before Fit Story, so maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And I was there, and the very first day when they said, right, you're going to go around the room, you're going to introduce yourselves, I then spoke out again. It just flowed through me. You know, it wasn't planned. It wasn't anything. So I then spoke out again to the people there. Then driving home from that mastermind, my bubble, you know, when we surround ourselves with people who are steps ahead of us, our bubble increases, right? And then if we leave their company and we go back to our normal life, the bubble shrinks back down again. Hence why we see this all the time in people's lives, in our own lives sometimes. So I'm driving back from the mastermind, and I'm like, right, I need to share my story again. And then the voice in my head, do it and get home. But no, I'm not going to do it when I get home, because I'll talk myself out of it. And I'll sell myself a story as to why I don't need to do it again, because I've already done it. So it's like, well, I need to do it. I don't want to call up my family members and tell them. I don't want to tell Tom, Dick, and Harry. I just want to just do it once and have everybody see it. So that's the answer to that, was a video to put on Facebook. So it took me 7 takes, did the video, popped it onto Facebook. Then that's how my family saw it. So I didn't necessarily sit them down and tell them. They saw the video. So I then go around and visit my stepmom and my grandma. And my stepmom was like, oh, we watched the video. And I said, yeah. She goes, well, we didn't know it happened for a year and a half. And I remember being like, what do you mean? She goes, well, the time that I caught it happening and I took you out, she goes, we just believed that was the only time it happened. So as a child, I never led them to believe that it happened for longer. So that was a very interesting discovery. And then from there, I then go around to my auntie's house, which is my dad's sister. And at my auntie's house, you got my auntie, you got my older cousin, and you got her son, so kind of like my younger cousin. And now Kelly, which is my older female cousin, I know that she was abused by my step granddad too, because she would tell me some stories growing up about it, and she hated his guts, and she still hasn't found forgiveness, so she's still on a very rough healing journey herself. I went round there, my auntie, my cousin sitting in the living room, and my auntie's like, oh, we watched a video. I'm like, well, I think everybody's seen my video by now. And Kelly was like, we didn't know it happened for a year and a half. And she goes, to be honest, if I did, I would be in prison. And I think with Kelly, she probably would have been in prison because she would have killed him, because she's extremely protective over me. And at that stage, a female growing up in West London who's been abused, she was very rough. She would get into fights all the time, and with the people that she was hanging around with. So it wouldn't surprise me if she would have gone to that length. So luckily it didn't. But then my auntie was like, well, you know that you weren't just the only one that was abused? I was like, well, no, me and Kelly. She goes, oh, it just wasn't you two. It was me and it was your dad. And that's when I sort of sat back on the couch and I was like, oh, shit. Okay. Now I know why he was an alcoholic. Now I know why he would shut me down every time I brought it up. Now I know why he told me to stay silent on the story when I was 11, because he was silent. And because if I
Mm.
spoke up about my story, I was speaking up about his story.
Yeah.
And he was never prepared to face that truth. And he would find his, his coping mechanism was vodka. And that was one of the causes of his death, post-mortem after the heart attack. And that's when it started, really, like the path of, right, I'm every single day of my life forever is going to be raising the volume on awareness around the generational cycle of abuse, on intrafamilial abuse, and breaking the silence, especially for men, because if you look at statistics on men and women who've been abused, women are higher, i.e., the statistics on the amount of women who are abused are a lot higher than men.
Mm.
And if we had the real stats on everyone, women may be higher than men. But the real statistics that are out there, and we all know this, does not reflect truthfully on how
No.
many men have been abused, because most of the men who have been abused are silent.
Yeah, and the
So,
story of your father is, I got shivers as you were telling that story, because it is a brave move. If it is a familial thing, it's a brave move, because you breaking your silence was breaking the silence for the whole family.
mm,
And that's a responsibility that I'm sure is another thing that might silence people and
it's
think,
one of the main things.
I can't say anything because I'm telling the secrets of others in the telling of my secret.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I've had people ask me, like, if your dad was alive, would you be sharing your story? And that's been something I've always thought about, because my dad was he was a lovely man, but
Mm.
he was quite emotionally abusive and manipulative, and he was very, like, his parenting style was like inflicting fear into his kids, right? That
Mm.
was how he was. So I really thought about it, and I would be sharing my story, but I just wouldn't have my dad's name in it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say my dad was abused, it would just be me. Now
Mm.
that doesn't necessarily mean it would have been good either, because I would have got a huge backlash from my dad. Because again, me sharing my story, there would have been he would have felt like there was some light on him, because
Mm.
there's a light on the family name. Because that's one of the things that he said when I was 11. He goes, "We don't want a black cloud over the family name,
Right.
right? They want a black cloud over the family." So me sharing my story, I would have brought, in his eyes,
Yeah.
a black
So
cloud.
you're now holding that responsibility of the whole family, the
Yeah,
reputation of your family. That's a weight for a young man, isn't it?
it is. It is. And I tell people is that there's nothing more important than your truth. So if I would have shared my story and my dad would have, which he would have done, flipped his shit. But if we make it really bad and he would have said, right, I'm not speaking to you, or whatever it was, then I would have said, fine. This is your actions, and this is what I tell people. It's like, family, yes, they're blood. You want them to accept your story. You want them to be by your side. But if they choose the path of not being by your side, then you have to treat it with love and
Mm.
continue doing what you're doing. Because if you don't, then there's always going to be a resentment, because you're going to feel like that specific family member is holding your truth back. And whether you
Yeah.
don't see it today, you will see it in 5 years' time. So yeah, I will still be doing it. And there is a responsibility for sure, but I believe it's a responsibility that you need to go forward with, because the consequences of living in silence far outweigh the consequences of breaking it, in my eyes.
That's very powerful. And in your situation, your grandfather or your step grandfather had already passed also by the time your silence was
Yeah,
broken.
he died like 2 years after the abuse. So like when I was like 13, 14,
All right.
he had a
Okay.
heart attack.
And how far back do you think this abuse in your family went? Did it start with him, or does it go back further than that, do you think?
Well, as a whole, the majority of the time when it comes to abuse within a family, it always goes back.
Mm.
And there is no studies and stats on this. Maybe I can be the person who does it, but from experience, for the amount of stories that get shared with me and the people that I speak to, and I always ask the question, for example, the person that abused you, were they abused? And
Mm.
if they don't know, they will say they don't know. But if they do know, if they have the answer as to whether it's yes or no, literally, honestly, like 9 times out of 10 has always been yes whenever I ask these questions. Okay.
Interesting.
And for me, I found out the answers because one of the best ways in my eyes for you to heal is to seek understanding. And if you can seek understanding, because as human beings, we always have questions and we need answers, so if we can seek understanding, then that allows us to find forgiveness, let go, and move forward. So for me, I had an idea that my step granddad came from an abusive background because my dad gave me a hint one time.
Right.
He stopped it straight away as soon as I understood what his hint meant. And his hint was asking if I'd seen the film Spotlight. I said yes. And he said at the end of the movie, they list Cork Island, and that's when you said granddad grew up. I'm like, well, why on earth would you say that? What are you trying to, yeah, so what if he grew up there? What does that mean? So my dad obviously knew something. And I later found out that my dad and my auntie, they had a rough idea on what happened, but it didn't have specifics. And I ended up finding out the specifics later on, which I'll get onto now. So one of the biggest fears people have with getting a story out there, and that story could be in the form of media, in the form of a book, whatever it is. But your story is out there for the wide amount of people to see.
Mm.
Is a response from what people may think, but as in like whether it's the abuser's family or whether it's their own family, right? I don't know what response they're going to get. That was the only ever time that I had a bit of I'm gonna do this, but I am hesitating, right?
Mm.
Because before I put my book out, and I was like, right, when I get this book out, I'm gonna go all in on media because I need people to read this book. And I just gotten like an exclusive article in the Sun, and I was like, right, there's a high chance that the family of my step granddad are gonna see this.
Right.
High chance. And then it might have been like maybe 3 or 4 weeks after my book released. They ended up, I got a message from somebody, and I didn't know who it was because I was 11 when I stopped seeing my step granddad. So I'd been in the same room as members of his family like beforehand, but I don't remember any of them. So as far as I'm concerned, I've never spoken to his family before.
Right.
I didn't get a message from somebody, and I didn't recognize the name. And I just thought it was somebody being like, oh, hey, thank you for your story, blah, 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 blah. And I started reading it. I was like, hey, Perry, it's her name. And it's your step granddad's family, whatever, because she hasn't identified herself publicly, so I don't want to give it away. But it's a family member of the person, and I just threw the phone down because it was a long message she sent me, and I'm like, Jesus, where's she going to go with this? Is she going to try and take me to court for defamation? Is she going to try and to out me to the media, say he's lying? And I just pick up the phone. I had a look at the message, and she goes, just to let you know that you have the full support of our family because he abused all of us too. Growing
Wow.
up. And then I was just like, Jesus. I was like, wow. And I ended up meeting with 2 members of his family in London. And it was just crazy because one of them just looked a spitting image of my step granddad. And it was a very weird time. Not in a bad way, just weird. And then I ended up speaking to both of them. Me and Kelly, my cousin, went. It's very healing, got a lot of closure. And they basically told me more about my step granddad. So there was 4 of them. I got my step granddad, his brother, 1 and 3 sisters, but one of them, the parents died. The eldest one didn't need to go to a school or anything, so the 2 girls went to a boarding school for underprivileged kids run by nuns in Cork in Ireland, and then the 2 boys went to one run by priests. St. Joseph's Industrial School is what it's called. And one of the girls is deaf in one ear because she used to get beat by the nuns on the side of the head. And then the 2 boys, step granddad included, were raped and abused by the priest there. And if you have a look at St. Joseph's Industrial School in Google, you will see the reports that have come out. So that school ended up closing. There was no like email to the parents, we're closing in 6 months' time, make arrangements. They just closed the school one day, just like that, right? And all the reports started coming out of what actually went. Like the priest would walk into the room with all the boys in their bunk beds, and they would tap on their chosen bed. The priest would leave. The kid would then have to go and follow. Then he will go back to his bed an hour later. They would have to make him stand at the top of stairs, butt naked, right? In a form of humiliation amongst the students. So it's a horrific environment. So that's the environment that my step-granddad grew in. Now, does that excuse his actions? No. My dad was abused by my step-granddad. Did he abuse me? My dad? No. He abused himself, but he didn't abuse me, right? So the sexual abuse, that cycle of sexual abuse ended with my dad.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, don't get me wrong. Fragments of like the silence that he was living in did get passed down to me.
Yeah.
Okay. So there is a generational cycle of abuse there, in different elements.
There's a ripple effect.
Exactly. It's exactly that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. So but it allowed me to seek understanding, allowed me to understand why he went down a path that he did. And then that allowed me to then find forgiveness and be able to move forward.
Yeah, and that forgiveness part is a big part of your healing as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that I appreciate about the most. When people say, "What's the best way I can move forward in my life?" I always say, and trust me, it gets the most heat. I've done a couple of reels on it, video reels, and I'm like, "How dare you? Can't tell me to forgive the person who abused me for 6 years." And I'm like, listen. And even though I'll do a whole 60-minute clip to say that forgiveness has nothing to do with them, it's everything to do with you. Because you know your worth, and you know that if you don't find forgiveness, you cannot move forward, because if you could, you would have done it by now. But they don't listen to anything that I say, because they're so wrapped up in their feelings. And when I say forgive them, it's like I'm on the abuser's side, and I'm shaking their hand, we're having a little party, and it's got nothing to do with that. But that's why I lead with it all the time, because it's the most powerful thing.
And it is probably a very difficult thing to get your head around. But if you were to be able to go back and see your step-grandfather as that young boy who was abused, you wouldn't have blame, you would have sympathy. Or
yeah,
you'd want to rescue him and take him out of that situation. And it's interesting, while you're speaking, I'm hearing one person has sexually abused many other people, and so we see a lot more about sexual abuse. And as you say, not all of them are going to become sexual abusers, but there are some who will perpetuate the problem. Yep. And so doing this forgiveness work and breaking your silence is, and I'll choose my words carefully, but you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it to heal yourself so that it stops. It doesn't get perpetuated. You don't become the perpetrator.
Yeah, I see it as creating new generations who, because if we look at a lot of abuses within the family environment, and I always will say that, because outside of a family environment is different, okay, and I'm not in that field, but in a family environment, a lot of people who abuse have been abused themselves. So if we can create this wave of healing to then heal the people who have been abused, so they don't abuse their children, then the children grow up not being abused, and they're not going to abuse their children. So it creates new generations that have been healed. And then the effect of that is less abuse. Now, will that end abuse? Well, no, partly because that's a massive task, and also because, and this has been proven, that there are people who are born who are sexually attracted to children. Right. And this isn't about whether you agree with it or not. It's about facts. And that is the case.
Right.
So it's like, well, can we heal them by healing their wounds? Not necessarily, because they have a sexual attraction which has been there in the same way that I'm attracted to females, and some females attracted to men. No, and they're trying to create. I can't remember what the word was for it. Like they're trying to give it like you got straight, you got bi, you got gay. They're trying to give the child thing its own label, right? There's a group out there that's trying to give it its own label to make pedophiles feel like they're not the scum of the earth because they can't help it because they're born that way. I can't remember what the word was, but so the reason I'm bringing that up is because people like that won't be healed by this movement that I'm creating, but I'm trying to create the ones who have been affected, who have wounds that haven't been healed, and that leads them to become the person that they feared the most in their life.
And even as you said before about how it stopped with your father, but still there was a level of consequence that was passed on to the way he parented you.
Yeah,
it heals that too.
Yeah, it does. It's because when there's an environment of sexual abuse, a lot of the times it's not just sexual abuse. You got emotional abuse. You might have physical abuse. So there's other forms of abuse that happens. So it's like, there was a lot of manipulation and emotional abuse, even though he didn't mean it from our dad. He didn't mean it, but that's just the way he was. And that, you're not born with that. That has been created by things. Those things are usually wounds that haven't been healed yet and from past experiences. So so it's not just sexual abuse. There's other repercussions and ripples that need to be healed in the process too.
So this is very powerful work. Very powerful work, and I think would you call it courage? Did it take courage to break the silence? Was it courage that you had to muster? What did you have to muster to be able to do that?
I mean, I guess I saw this video within the last couple of days. No, it wasn't a video. It was was it Mumford & Sons? The guy came out recently in the newspapers. He's blown up because he talked about his child's sexual abuse. I'm sure did you see it recently?
I haven't seen it.
I'm sure, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's Mumford & Sons, one of the singers from that and musicians. He came out about his sexual abuse. And I read it and I was like, that's so interesting. Where he was like, what people say the most to me is, oh, you're so strong for speaking out. And he goes, it got to a point where that affected me because what that's basically saying is that the people who don't speak out are weak. Right? And I was like, that's interesting. I don't tend to give meaning to words because I just believe that they're words. Right. And I know that isn't always the case because words can create a lot of pain and a lot of drama. So like, I don't know. Like before I would have said strong, like before, without really thinking. And I saw that, I was like, oh, that is interesting, because was I weak when I didn't? I wouldn't like to say so, because what that does is it further tells men who are living in silence that you're weak, and that can have the opposite effect of what we actually want them to do. But, courageous, bold, I guess so. I guess those are all words that you can give to it. But I think it's more of just, I know there wasn't a process of me being like, I need to, like before, like you see in a movie before a fight, like, they're amping themselves up, like, well, you got to be strong now, you got to be powerful, you better step in the ring, right? That, and they are actively trying to make themselves fall in line with what those words describe. When I was, before breaking my silence, I never like psyched myself up or told myself that I needed to gain a little of courage or boldness or power or strength in order to do it. It was more of just like, it was like this 12-year of silence that was just living inside of me that needed to be released. It's hard to describe. So it was just like, it felt like I was, like the universe was flowing through me. And
right.
It was
so that powerful.
Yeah. You know what I mean? So that's why I struggled to give it words to describe it, because I kind of feel like it was more than, you can't even put it into words what that process was.
And what's coming to my mind is, before we came on, you asked me why the show is called No More Pea Soup, and I told you the story of how it came to be. So the book, The Giants and the Smalls, that's Wake Up with Giants TV, founder Nick Smith wrote. It's the journey of a character called Rit, and he is seeking to work out how do the Giants have their lives, and I'm just a small down here. And on his journey, he reaches a point in his development where he's grown so much that his clothes don't fit and he can't get into his house anymore. And there's a moment in our lives where we know we can't go on the way things are. We can't go back. It's a forward journey, but the journey might not be clear. It might be a journey that we're afraid of, but we also know we can't go back. And in the story, the Smalls eat pea soup and crackers, and so this is called No More Pea Soup. It is a statement of I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to live small. I need to change. I can't go back. And it's whether it's courage or strength or having the universe flowing through you, in that moment you start taking the next steps towards the light, towards healing, to becoming a giant. And that's kind of what I'm hearing in what you're saying.
Yeah.
It is that moment where it might even be surrender. There's probably many words that you could use to describe that. But it's the moment of I can't live like this anymore. I'm going to do something different.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, I think with that is, I think everybody, not everybody, because my dad didn't, but I think a lot of people will, like my dad surrendered to alcohol because he struggled to deal with it.
So it's
with just
numbing
himself.
Yeah. It's numbing his feelings.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And for him, he, in his eyes, he didn't want to go back because it was too scary to go back. And it's like, well, and it's too scary to confront the path behind him. The path going forward was probably just as scary as well because he was living in silence. So I think he just stayed in this limbo stage.
Yeah.
Of not knowing to go backwards or to go forwards, because in a way both of them are as scary as each other. And if he's in that middle stage, then it's like, well, it will get to a certain point before you kill yourself, right? Or you go forward, or you use a coping mechanism to stay in that middle stage just a little bit longer. And I think that he was just there,
Yeah, in limbo land.
Yeah.
Not achieving his full potential, probably not being the man he probably so desperately wanted to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sad. And there's probably when we look behind addictions and certain behaviors, there's always something that's being numbed, something that's being avoided, and that's a lot of suffering, isn't it?
It is a lot of suffering.
So how can people contact you if this has struck a chord with them?
You feel free to DM me, whether it's on Instagram, and it's just my name, Perry Power, what I am, Perry Power. Whether you want to message me on Facebook, Perry Power, or you want to message me on TikTok. Those are the three platforms that I use, and those are the three platforms that you can reach out to me on.
Fantastic. And what's in your future, Perry Power? Your name is amazing. With an acting career, they're not going to ask to change your name, are they?
No. Stage name was created the day I was born. So for me, moving forward, it's a couple of things. So it's getting a UK charity greenlit. It just got red lit. It got declined by the British government recently. So, and I think in a lot of countries that you try to, like it was a ball ache getting a charity up and running in America. So I know it's going to be a ball ache here. Sometimes it can take multiple submissions. But the good thing about the UK government is that they don't just say, we don't like your charity, that's it. They will give you 3 or 4 pages of descriptions and what they're looking for, you know,
Right.
and how if you want to resubmit your charity, do it, but with our thoughts in mind on what you guys should be doing. So that is something that I'm going to revisit. It's not number 1 on the priority list. It's maybe I'd say maybe number 3 at the moment.
So you have your charity in the States,
Got the
which
charity, yeah.
is shelter for victims.
Yeah, so we rescue kids. So what we do is we get referrals primarily for children who've been abused, and what we do is we give them free mental health care. So we have licensed child therapists, and then we take them through consultations, and then we then partner the children up with a therapist, and then they will have their therapy for whether it's 3, 6, or 12 months.
Right.
So that's essentially what we do, is like a mental health care system. And
set up for the UK as well.
was that, sorry?
Is that's the same thing that you want to set up in the UK as a UK charity, or is that slightly different?
Well, so it's slightly different. I mean, at some point, I'm actually in communication with somebody who works for the NHS, and she has said to me multiple times that we rescue kids in the UK to go alongside CAMS and to give more of help within the NHS care system. And that is the case. It's just with these things, it's like it takes like fucking even a year to get the ball rolling with a charity. It's you know, and it's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because when you get to that stage, you've got very strong foundations. It's a curse because if you've got other spinning plates in the air, it's a lot to manage. So the We Rescue Kids, we're going to be bringing it into the UK at some point. Yes, the charity that I'm trying to get set up in the UK is called the Andy Project, and it's for men, adults who have been living in silence for X amount of years because of the abuse that they went through as a child. And what that is men will reach out to us. We give them a buddy that they can have, basically another male survivor of abuse. Because what I found is that a lot of people who get therapists and counselors, they whilst it works for a lot of people, it also doesn't work for some people. And what the feedback that I get from those people who reach out to me who've tried therapy and counseling and it doesn't work for them is because, whether it's right or wrong is regardless, but this is I'm relaying information that's been fed to me from multiple people, is that the therapist or the counselor hasn't been there. So they're not talking from a place of experience, they're talking from a place of professionalism, right? And what these survivors want is to talk to somebody who has been there. I'm like, I get it. Yeah. Yeah, I've been suicidal. Yeah, I was, felt up by my granddad multiple times. I get it, and that's what they want to hear because there's no judgment, right? And that's what I want to provide for a charity system, is that same level of like, I have been there. I'm not a therapist. I will talk to you, let's chat for 3 months, for example. And at the end of it, then they might be in a better place to seek therapy because then it's a professional help. You see what I mean? Yeah. So that's something that I'm trying to get set up with the Andy Project. So we've got the Andy Project, we've got We Rescue Kids. We've got just me continuing with my brand, getting my message out there, growing the audience. And then we have, which is probably at the top of the list because it's going to have the biggest return on influence and impact, is the film. So at the moment, we're working on the script for the Breaking the Silence movie. We've got a production company out in LA working alongside us, and it's about finishing the script. It's then about packaging it, and it's about sitting down with Netflix and asking them to get it, because if they don't, then we'll go to somebody else. So yeah, it's a very exciting stuff.
There is no plan B, right?
No, there's never a plan B.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. It sounds like you've got a lot on, and it's all focused in such a positive way. And as you were talking about the buddy system and the charity you're wanting to set up here, I was reminded of the earlier part of the conversation of having that space to break your silence, in that process of breaking it with yourself first, and then having a safe space to break your silence and have that other person who gets you and understands and has the experience to understand, and what a vital role that is in the healing process.
Yeah, it's a necessity. I think it's an important requirement that's needed to have a successful healing journey.
Mm.
Because one of the things that I do in regards to business is, and I'll say it now, is about helping survivors of abuse to write and launch a book within 60 days. And what we do, like one of the main reasons why people do that is because they either write a book for themselves or they write a book for others,
Mm.
primarily. The other one, whatever's primary, the other one would just be a cherry on the top. And it's like, you have people who have broken the silence and they're like, right, I want to now do what you're doing, Perry. I want to change lives. I want to build a movement. And then they'll write a book because I want to create impact. But I'll probably say it's like maybe 60-40. 40% is that who's signing up so far into the program. The 60% is people who want to write a book for themselves. They're like, because I know there's still healing to do. There's still clarity. There's still closure. And I want to
Mm.
be able to just, the book that I've been living inside of here, I want to be able to hear it. I want to be able to hear my story. I want a physical representation of what my story actually stands for. Because I know that at the end of the 60 days, when I've got the book in my hands, I know that the person that I've then become is going to be just transformational. And
Yeah.
that's like part of the breaking the science process. Because if you can sit down and write your story in a form where it's like you're healing and you're not saying boo hoo, like cry for me and I want sympathy, but you're doing it from a place of empathy and inspiration, then it's one of the best ways you can break your silence.
Mm. So this is really bringing people out of the state of being in victimhood, of that it's out of my control and I have no power, to giving them a voice, giving them that that ability to hear their own story.
Yeah. One of the, I guess the only polarizing thing about my my messaging and what I stand for is that I can't stand for victim mentality. And there's a
Mm.
lot of people, even in my audience, who are in the world of victim mentality. And some of the
Yeah.
things that I say will sting them. And if it has to sting them for them to see the actual picture in 4 weeks' time and then come back and okay, Perry, I get it now, then great. If I have to take that on in regards to hate. But because if you live in a world of victimhood, that's just, it's going to get you nowhere. It's going to get you, alcohol addiction, drug addiction. It's going to get you breaking down your family. It's going to get you to be broke for your entire life, but you don't feel worthy of anything else other than bitching about the billionaires who should be saving the planet. See what I mean?
Mm.
Like there's so much in there. And I stand against victimhood and I stand for being a warrior. Because you can go from being a victim to being a survivor, which means that you've owned your story, right? That's a perfect place to be. But then you
Yeah.
got the step after is like, okay, I've owned my story. I've owned my life. Now I want to help other people own their story too. And that's when you become a warrior fighting for other people and fighting for
Yeah.
something. So there is a transition there that people need to go on. And that's primarily, if you have to take everything that I say around breaking the science and everything, and you have to dilute it into something, it's about going from being a victim to being a survivor. Then if you wish to, that's important. Like there's no, I don't give a shit.
Mm.
Victim to being a survivor is necessary. The step after, whether you want to be a warrior, that's up to you. I will never force that upon you because you don't have to fight for other people, right?
Mm.
It's enough to just fight for yourself and for your family and doing whatever you're doing. You can live a happy life. But if you want to become a warrior, then that's, I guess, where the business element comes in and, and the strategies that you can use to build a movement.
Yeah, saving yourself first, isn't it, before you go out
Exactly.
and save the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you would like to add to your message to our audience today?
I guess the last thing is kind of what I was saying there. Tony Robbins says a lot: to change your story, change your life. And I think when it comes to victims of abuse, and if they're at the stage survivors of abuse, is that's advice that I don't recommend to those people, because people who've been through abuse spend a lot of years trying to run away from the abuse,
Mm.
and they will try to change their story, right? But I believe that if you've been through abuse, your power was taken away by the abuser. And if you have no power, then you're not in control of your life, because
Mm.
a good portion of it will be controlled by the abuser, whether they're dead or not. So it's about taking ownership over your life, owning the story that you've lived, owning the abuse that you went through, because only when you can take full ownership and be proud. I say proud in a weird way, but I still stand by that word. I know,
Mm.
I'm proud of what I went through in a way that I'm owning that shit and I'm wearing that on my sleeve. Yeah, I'm proud of it. If I wasn't proud of it, I wouldn't be saying it in reels and on content every single day.
Mm.
Because you don't talk about shit that you're not proud of. So yeah, I'm proud of the story that I've lived because I've owned it, and that allows me to own my life. And that's the thing that I'll say to people listening is that if you haven't owned your story yet, then there's no way you're going to be owning the life that you want to live. So once you take ownership, then you can take ownership over your life. That's the last thing I want to say.
Wow. You were named so aptly. You are a powerful man. And thank you for all that you're doing in the world, especially for the men in the world who do keep these secrets and silences. And I appreciate your time. And anyone who wants to contact Perry, he TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and check out the book if you're holding secrets and you want a first step to breaking your silence. I think the book is probably a really good place to start.
Yeah, it's definitely the book, and I have a Facebook group which is like a free community. It's called the Power Tribe. So if you want to, like, you just have to be in a group and you'll see that people are breaking their silence for the very first time, like publicly inside that group, and people are just caring, they're loving, they're supporting. So if you want a tribe of people who be able to relate to you, then you've got the Power Tribe on Facebook, which you'll be able to find if you go on my profile.
Brilliant. Thank you, Perry. And
Cheers, Fiona.
thank you everyone for listening and watching. And we're just about on time. And I will see you in a couple of weeks.
Boom.
Boom.